Welcome to the Beginner's Guide to the History of Philosophy. This is Episode 1, The First Philosopher. During the Archaic period, the mid-8th to roughly 6th century BCE, the peoples of the Greek peninsula gradually settled into a group of city-states. They developed an alphabetical system of writing, as well as the beginnings of what is now recognized as Western philosophy. Previous civilizations had relied mainly on religion to explain phenomena in the world around them. But now a new breed of thinkers emerged, who attempted to find natural, rational explanations to things. The first of these new scientific thinkers that we are aware of, at least, was called Thales of Miletus. Nothing survives of his writings, but we know that he had a good grasp of geometry and astronomy, mostly because he is accused of having predicted the total eclipse of the sun in 585 BCE. This practical turn of mind led him to believe that events in the world were not due to supernatural intervention, but had natural causes that reason and observation could reveal. We know that Thales was born and lived in Miletus, on the coast of what is now Turkey, but we know very little about his actual life. None of his writings, if indeed he left any, have survived. However, his reputation as one of the key early Greek thinkers seems deserved, and he is referred to in some detail by both Aristotle and Diogenes Laertius, the 3rd century biographer of the ancient Greeks. Anecdotal evidence suggests that, as well as being a philosopher, Thales was also actively involved in politics and was a very successful businessman. So much so that, as one story goes, Thales deduced that specific weather conditions, not appeals to the gods, led to a good harvest. So one year he predicted a super high yield of olives, and is said to have bought up all the local olive presses, and then made a huge profit by renting them out to people. He is also thought to have traveled widely around the eastern Mediterranean, and while visiting Egypt to have learned the practical geometry that was later to become the basis of his deductive reasoning. However, Thales was above all a teacher, the first of the so-called Milesian school of philosophers. Anaximander, his pupil, expanded his scientific theories and in turn became a mentor to Anaximenes, who is believed to have taught the young mathematician, Pythagoras. For a little bit of prior historical context, from roughly 2500 BCE to around, let's say, 900 BCE, the Minoan civilization in Crete and the later Mycenaean civilization in Greece relied heavily on religion to explain physical phenomena, if not entirely. Around 1100 BCE, the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, describes the primal state of the world as a watery mass. And then, a little down the road, in about 700 BCE, Theogony, by the Greek poet Hesiod, relates to how the gods created the universe. So this is pretty much what Thales was working with here, as far as ideas go. And so, even though these contemporary and older civilizations were creating these beautiful works of religious literature and art, they weren't using the reasoning aspects of their minds. This is why Thales of Miletus was known as the first philosopher. Thales needed to establish a first principle from which to work, so he posed the question, what is the basic material of the cosmos? The idea that everything in the universe can be ultimately reduced to a single substance is the theory of monism. And Thales and his followers were first to propose it within Western philosophy. Thales reasons that the fundamental material of the universe had to be something out of which everything else could be formed, as well as being essential to life, and capable of motion and therefore change. He observes that water is clearly necessary to sustain all forms of life, and then it moves and changes, assumes different forms, from liquid to solid ice to vaporous mist. So Thales concludes that all matter, regardless of its apparent properties, must be water in some stage of transformation. Thales also notes that every landmass appears to come to an end at the water's edge. From this he deduces that the whole of the earth must be floating on a bed of water, from which it has emerged. When anything occurs to cause ripples or tremors in this water, Thales states we experience them as earthquakes. So as interesting as his rational deductions were, they weren't quite correct. But that's okay. As interesting as the details of his theories are, they are not the main reason why he's considered a major figure in the history of philosophy. His true importance lies in the fact that he was the first known thinker to seek naturalistic, rational answers to fundamental questions, rather than to ascribe objects and events to the whims of capricious gods. By doing so, he and the later philosophers of the Milesian school laid the foundations for future scientific and philosophical thought across the Western world.